Who has a
Can you
question?
come back to the architectural question someone had where we left off?
Yeah, so let's come back to architectural fees since that was our previous question.
Sure, yeah. So it definitely varies widely. And there's just a big range in kind of final product and support and scope of services that you can negotiate with an architect, right? So on the lowest end of it, you could just be basically getting your basic permit design or your basic permit documents created. On the other end of it, you're getting like a full design package with all of your materials and details and fixtures and appliances specified and fully integrated into your, as kind of a whole picture of your home, and then getting like construction administration and project management support as well. So it's like two huge ranges, and so as a homeowner, I think you need to have a good idea of what it is that you're expecting or what it is that you feel like you need. An architect can help you kind of figure that out. But generally speaking, I think architecture fees can range as a projected percentage of your projected construction, and it can range anywhere from like 5 to 20% depending on what that scope of service is that you want. But I think if you think about 10%, that's usually a good range.
Okay, next question.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll
I
start.
was just going to say, since this just came about in 2017, and you guys have had success in this, you're probably going to be a lot in demand because you know exactly what to do. Do you have a large enough crew that we can actually get some information from you so that we can, if we come across something like this, we can refer to you?
Definitely, the city of Long Beach has an extensive crew. We have David Coran, who spearheads, he's really behind this, our superintendent. We have Oscar Lassie, another one supervisor.
Well, have you done a lot of these since
We've
2017?
done quite a few. Virginia was the very first one to test, but it was so well.
Long
Beach. Yeah.
Long Beach. And our mayor, Mayor Garcia, is absolutely key to the fact that we developed this program too. It's a very smooth program because if you go through the process with one of our guys, you're gonna love it. It's really well worked out. And again, our mayor Garcia, he spearheaded this thing and made it happen. So I think hopefully if you're gonna build in Long Beach, love to have you. And we've got a great program for you. So
You do have in your folder, there's an article that you did in our newsletter on adding ADUs, and there's some numbers in there that show what the increase has been since the laws were changed.
Yeah.
And it has increased pretty significantly the number of ADU projects.
One of the,
I was just going to say, I think it's important to clarify too that all the things that we're talking about here today are specific to the city of Long Beach because it's generally a zoning issue and zoning is specific. So everything that's built needs to comply with California building code and then local jurisdiction. So this ADU thing, every city has its own ordinance. So if you have a property that is not in the city of Long Beach that you're considering this, you would need to, the information might be a little bit different.
Thank you for clarifying that.
so one of the things I wanted to mention is when you build an ADU, you actually, it becomes, I have an R2 property, so I could actually put another unit back there, but my ADU has now made my address, so you have my regular number, let's just say it's 700. So my ADU is now 700A. They get their own separate address, which is pretty cool. Shannon, thank you so much. First of all, I forgot to thank you. Thank you. I've known Shannon for over 30 years. She's sold quite a few pieces of my former properties years ago. But I wanted to say that Shannon will tell you that once you build these, I know my property value has gone up significantly. And that's something that you need to look at in terms of, I haven't had my property reappraised, but it is something that I know without doubt.
But I mean, even if you weren't, say, counting, and of course it's always going to be because there's not enough 2-on-1s,
Exactly.
period.
Yes.
But just when you look at how many years it would take to pay it off with just the rents, it's an astonishing opportunity, in my opinion.
Well, I have,
It-
could
Absolutely.
I go to your question about the increase in value?
Yes,
It's a perception thing, however, though, because some people look at the fact that you're sharing your living space with somebody else as a detriment. They don't necessarily want somebody, so I was speaking to somebody yesterday who just told me that he bought a house, which, because it had a second unit permitted on it, it actually sat on the market for the longest time. By the way, this is in San Francisco, which is one of the hottest markets anywhere.
right.
They might have had the wrong agent.
That might be so, but
You know,
some
that's
people view that as a detriment.
I think that's a great offer, but I think it also has, certain communities have certain cultural differences. I'm a Spaniard. We grew up caring for our families. My grandmother lived with us until she passed on. We're seeing that a lot in Long Beach. There's a developer right now. I was just talking to Larry about it on the way here, who is actually building urban Pacific Group is actually building multi-generational homes, rectangular, 2-story, 3-story with 5 rooms, with a kitchen downstairs and rooms downstairs for the elderly family members, and then, additional family upstairs. But I think that's a cultural perception,
The other thing is, I think that value and preference are 2 different things. Absolutely adding a second unit, an ADU, adds value. Does that mean that there will be some people who don't want it because of the privacy? For sure. And so having a home in an ADU isn't for everyone. That's why we're providing the information, so you can help evaluate. Is this something that I want? Like, I want to purchase a property that has one, or I might want to add one where I am now, or look at potentially buying a property where I could add one, and then what would those elements need to be? But it's all about personal preference, and that's why I think that our panelists really shared that there's a lot of different options. So, next question.
What are the property tax implications of adding an ADU?
Well, anytime you add value to the property or you make improvements, and that's true whether you just add square footage to an existing dwelling or you add an ADU or you make other improvements, there is a reassessment of taxes.
Whatever that,
Reassessment of the entire property or reassessment?
whatever that permit fee is, whatever the fees are, so if the project's value, if not the fees, but if the project, whatever the valuation is, so if the valuation on the project is 200,000, it's 1.5.
1.25.
Or 1.25 times that is gonna be your,
The
The
value of the
increase.
property would go up by 200,000.
Yeah.
Even if you're not adding square footage?
If you make improvements that add value, then the tax assessor's office will reassess it. Yes.
So
So
by
it doesn't
adding a
reassess the
kitchen
main
or adding
property.
bathrooms, right? Inherently.
they're not reassessing that, they're just reassessing they're assessing the improvement.
Correct. Yeah.
That's a good question though, that could be up for some negotiation with the assessor, which you can do. So, you can, at any time, you can go to the assessor and talk to them about how your property is being assessed, which I've done for a number of clients over the years, and get it lowered, the assessed value lowered, so it lowers your property tax.
Yeah, and if you ever need to do that, that's something that we do assist folks with, is if you feel like the assessed value on your property is more than it's really worth, there is a method for challenging that, and you can provide information. So if you have any questions on that, since this isn't our topic, feel free to message me or talk to me later. Back there, you've been waiting for a while.
Different question. If I live in a duplex, can I add an ADU? No. Okay, I thought you said that. Yeah, that popped up.
The process of getting the loan for ADU, is that similar to getting the loan for a home as well?
So that's a great question, and actually in your packet, we have some information from a couple different lenders that we work with. And so there are some different options, either for if you have an existing property and you want to look at how could I come up with some money to finance that. That might be through pulling equity from your existing property, but there's also some options if you want to purchase a property with an eye towards adding an ADU, there are several options. So there's, excuse me, flyers in there and lender information. And you're welcome to get in contact with them and they can talk a little bit more about the specifics. Yeah, in the brown shirt.
This is for you.
Yes.
How would this be appraised? Would it be appraised on its income or would it be appraised based on income?
Yeah, so I'm not an appraiser, but what they're gonna do is they're gonna look at it in comparison with other similar properties. And so, an appraiser will typically take into account the rental income, the square footage, the improvements, the location, and all of that. In the back.
Do you know, is it still categorized as a single family with the ADU, or is it now a 2-on-1?
It would be a single family.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
okay.
because it's an A, the A is sort of the key thing, the accessory, so it's an accessory use to the main, which is why it must always be owner occupied. If it was just like a, like a duplex or 2-on-1, those are sort of independent homes, even though they're on the same lot.
Right, okay,
In the city of Long Beach, it's always gonna be an A as an additional dwelling unit at the end of the original address. The address is the primary house with an A on the end. Other cities may do it different, but we do it so we always know that that was an additional dwelling unit added. For our-
So like Gigi said, it would be like, 700 Main Street and then 700A Main Street. Yes.
So I know other cities have changed their rules on that you don't have to have it owner occupied anymore. So but Long Beach, as long as they're looking at it that's an accessory, like that's not gonna change, is it? It'll always, or
As far as that would be our administrators and of course our council, and that would be up to them. Those decisions are
so it's possible.
not.
To say it would never change, that
Right.
probably, there'll be some change, there's always changes, they just lowered the square footage to 52 or whatever, from 6,000, so I mean, they're making changes to this, they're getting used to the idea. The intent was always to make this happen by the state. It was, they were really excited to make it happen. The cities, it meant a lot more work for them and a lot of staff and changes, and so they resisted at first, but everybody's
didn't
getting
have a
on board
choice.
with it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to, it's like I said before, it's like, it's a zoning thing, so it's done, and the purpose of zoning and planning is to protect the character and quality of neighborhoods, right? So one of the so they write this ordinance in order to sort of provide these opportunities, but also protect the people that live there now, right? Because people buy single-family homes because they want to live in a single-family home neighborhood. So that's what the sort of intent is. However, city government, they are for the people, by the people, right? So they're going to respond to pressures and input from their constituency. However, I did address this question. I spoke with a planner and, asked is this expected to go into perpetuity, this covenant idea? And right now that's kind of their intent, forever. It seems like it makes sense to me as long as maybe if you own the property for 10 years and then decide to retire or something, then maybe that you want to kind of rent it all out, that might make sense, but as of now, that's how it's written, and that's how the covenant is written, that you're agreeing to that in perpetuity.
One of the things that we didn't touch on a lot is I live in a historical community, or neighborhood. Parking is impacted in my neighborhood, and parking is such a migraine here in our city, and the city is constantly trying to evolve and change and create more spaces. Part of my ability to build my ADU was that I took over, I have a very long driveway that leads to the carriage garage, and just adjacent to my garage was my garden. And I had concrete poured over that so that I can accommodate 6 vehicles in my driveway. A little bit of overkill, but I have family that comes to visit, and I'm constantly pulling my camping trailer in and out of the driveway. So that's something you really have to check with the city on. That was very important. They really hammered me on that. And fortunately in 2004, another forward-thinking thing that we did was we created additional parking, which can be done if you're creative and you say, okay, well, I'm going to have to, tear up some of my garden out to pour concrete over it.
So I have an existing 1,100 square foot house, and it kind of needs another bathroom. So I was thinking of moving it another 300 feet or so. So basically, for the existing 1,100, that'd be like a 550 max size, right? would the strategy be best to go and do the addition first, which, suppose I want to build a 700 square foot ADU, add the additional bathroom first, which would give you more square footage to build a bigger
If you're at the
ADU.
50% mark of your your square footage, so yeah, the more square footage you can increase it before that. And then
Could
if
you
you,
do, I guess, can you do concurrent projects where you're basically doing this and this at the same time, or just do one first?
I would definitely consult zoning on that. The zoning department, they allow you to do that, and they're pretty good. You can work with them, but so to my existing house, I want to add this amount, and this is the square footage, and thus, at doing that, they would probably insist that you have your permit already and start work on adding that, and then they would kick in with, I would imagine, your permit to divide it into a duplex. At that point, working with zoning is very important, and they can answer that question directly for you.
One of the things that, because Tom was talking, or I forget which one of you talked about, sort of that magic threshold where the fees kind of start increasing. That threshold is generally 500 square feet when you're talking about an addition to your primary residence. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind when you're talking about 550. It's like, is that extra 50 feet really important to you? If it is, then maybe you need to go 600 or something to make it worth it, because you're going to get a lot more fees once you go over 500. But yeah, it would potentially be a two-step process where you would have two separate permits, and the first permit for the addition of the house would most likely need to be approved and pulled, and then you could potentially do the ADU permit if you want to maximize the future size of your ADU.
I guess these are two separate structures, so it's basically.
Yeah, two separate structures, yeah.
Okay, in the black and white, you've been waiting a long time.
Well, first I just wanted to share one thing that got me really interested in ADU. I read an article recently that said more than 1/3 of millennials find it extremely important that a property has income potential. So thinking towards the future, I think it will definitely add a lot of value. But my question was, being that it's a state law, I know you're just Long Beach, but have you seen consistency in any areas across the cities? Things that people, if they're from other cities, should be aware about?
Probably Daniela and Tom would be
yeah.
best able to answer that since they work in various cities.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I think they're similar. The place where there's the differences are coming in the parking. What kind of, because basically the state law says that we can't unduly prohibit people from providing this extra living situation, right? So the big thing that zoning is usually concerned about is parking, and then kind of the heights and setbacks. So, for example, I think it's in, different parts of LA, depending on if you are within a certain radius to public transportation, you might not even need to add any parking at all. In the city of Long Beach, you don't have to add any parking at all. Unless you're in a parking impacted zone, then you have to have one. But then they allow tandem parking, which otherwise is not allowed. Usually in the city of Long Beach, every parking spot has to be in a garage, independently accessible, which uses a ridiculous amount of space. But usually it's parking and heights, and then also with that covenant, whether how they're defining whether it has to be owner occupied, if it can be Airbnb, because everyone wants to do this for Airbnb basically, right? But then also to kind of address your question about the kind of perception of value, because I've worked with some homeowners who are using the ADU to basically maximize the potential of their property, or to potentially unbutton that 250 square foot limitation due to high parking impact zone. And they're not necessarily going to rent it out to somebody right now, but they're just using it as a development tool for their property to increase the future